There is something that is rotten in Washington. Less than 1% of these files have been released.
Us Epstein survivors have been discussing creating our own list. We know the names. Many of us were abused by them.
This is Today As It Happened. Good Wednesday evening to you. I'm Holly Furfer, here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. From the House release of a massive set of documents regarding the case against Jeffrey Epstein, to survivors of Epstein's sex trafficking speaking out on Capitol Hill. So let's jump right in.
With Congress back in session, calls for transparency around the Epstein investigation are revving up again, and the House Oversight Committee released a large trove of documents. We're talking about more than 33,000 pages, but a lot of that information was already public. The release includes lengthy court documents as well as video and audio files. Some documents date all the way back to 2005, and they are related to the very lenient sentence that Epstein received in Florida, with an email from the prosecutor calling his plea, quote, the deal of the century. There's an audio file with an Epstein employee talking about a lot of girls that were very, very young visiting the home. The release also includes police summaries of interviews with victims, and there are, of course, redactions included, with some pages almost completely blacked out. Now, keep in mind, these 33,000 pages, it's probably only about a third of the evidence that exists. The Department of Justice has about 100,000 pages of evidence from their full investigation. And so the push for transparency is continuing. Representative Comer, the head of the House Oversight Committee, is promising more documents to come, including some information from the Epstein estate. And Democrats certainly not satisfied yet. Representative Robert Garcia, the top Democrat on the Oversight Committee, said, don't let this release fool you. A lot of that information was already public. And there are other Democrats from the Oversight Committee that are doubting whether the Epstein investigation was even fully completed, and they're calling on members of the public with any information to reach out to Democrats on the House Oversight Committee.
So if there's anyone in the public that believes that you have information that would be valuable, you've never been able to get through to federal agencies, or no one would listen to you when you try to go forward and bring information forward, I am asking that you trust Oversight Dems and you bring that information to us.
Representative Thomas Massie, a Republican from Kentucky, and Representative Ro Khanna, a Democrat from California, are working together to try to pass a bill to require the Department of Justice to release everything unclassified in the Epstein investigation. There are survivors on Capitol Hill again today supporting that bill and the full release of documents, with some survivors even saying that they deserve access to the unredacted documents as survivors of Epstein and his co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell. So this effort from Massie and Khanna, it's using a discharge petition. It's a way to force a bill to the floor of the House and go around the Speaker. But in order to be successful, they are going to need all of the Democrats in the House of Representatives, plus at least a handful of Republicans, to join on to their effort. Stephanie Liebergen, Scripps News Group, Washington.
All right, right now, some victims of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, along with their attorneys, are speaking at a rally called Stand with Survivors. Let's listen to the remarks.
This is not a partisan issue. This is a crime, the crime of sex trafficking, and the criminals must be held accountable. Disbelieving survivors creates a culture of silence. There is strength in numbers, and our courage is contagious. I want to humanize sex trafficking survivors for you all, just for one moment. We are not others. We are your sisters, your friends, your colleagues. We are in your community. Think about the women that you love, and then think about them being the victim of sexual assault.
Our demands are clear. Ghislaine Maxwell must remain in a maximum security prison for the rest of her life. No leniency, no deals, no special treatment. The Epstein documents must be unsealed. Every name, every detail, no more secrets, no more protection for those who preyed on the vulnerable.
In New York City, countless young women were abused by him. Everyone in the industry knew, yet he was too powerful to stop. He had friends in all over entertainment and arts, and his value to those friends made him untouchable. But I ask you why? Who was he to our government that he was allowed to operate openly for decades?
Today, as you can see, we're united in restoring trust in government. We're here not as partisans, we're here as patriots. We begin the work of bringing this country together, progressives, independents, moderates, and yes, MAGA supporters, to demand truth and justice.
The Washington establishment is asking the American public to believe something that is not believable. They're asking you to believe that two individuals created hundreds of victims and they acted alone, and that the DOJ has no idea of who else might have been involved, that nobody else did anything that rose to a criminal enterprise. The American people know that's not true. Now, the Speaker of the House just offered a fig leaf to my colleagues. They're going to vote on a non-binding resolution today that does absolutely nothing.
The shame does not fall on these brave, courageous women. The shame falls on every single person that coldly turned a blind eye to their abuse. The shame falls on every single person that enabled it. The shame falls on every single person that took money to continue it. And the shame falls on the people in power over the past several decades that protected the monster, Jeffrey Epstein, and his cabal that continued a nightmare. Those people deserve the shame.
President Trump, you have so much influence and power in this situation. Please use that influence and power to help us, because we need it now and this country needs it now.
I was only 14 years old when I met Jeffrey. It was the summer of high school. I was working 3 jobs to try to support my mom and my sister when a friend of mine in the neighborhood told me that I could make $300 to give an older guy a massage. It went from a dream job to the worst nightmare. There are many pieces of my story that I can't remember, no matter how hard I try. The constant state of wonder causes me so much fear and so much confusion. My therapist says that my brain is just trying to protect itself, but it's so hard to begin to heal knowing that there are people out there who know more about my abuse than I do. The worst part is that the government is still in possession right now of the documents and information about that could help me remember and get over all of this maybe and help me heal.
Congress must choose. Will you continue to protect predators, or will you finally protect survivors? And also, I would like to announce here today, us Epstein survivors have been discussing creating our own list. We know the names. Many of us were abused by them. Now, together as survivors, we will confidentially compile the names we all know who were regularly in the Epstein world. And it will be done by survivors and for survivors. No one else is involved. Stay tuned for more details.
All right, almost an hour and a half of survivors and members of Congress speaking in Washington to call for the passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. So much information in there. Ro Khanna, Thomas Massie saying, release the files. They will redact the names of the victims, the survivors, to protect them. But asking the question why government covered up for the wealthy, the powerful, who was involved in that cover-up. Coming up on Today as It Happened.
So this is a Democrat hoax that never ends. You know, it reminds me a little of the Kennedy situation. We gave him everything over and over again, more and more and more, and nobody's ever satisfied.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of the day's top stories. Just in the past hour, President Trump reacting to the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein speaking out on the steps of the Capitol.
So this is a Democrat hoax that never ends. You know, it reminds me a little of the Kennedy situation. We gave him everything over and over again, more and more and more, and nobody's ever satisfied. From what I understand, I could check, but from what I understand, thousands of pages of documents have been given. But it's really a Democrat hoax because they're trying to get people to talk about something that's totally irrelevant to the success that we've had as a nation since I've been president.
That comment coming as President Trump hosts the president of Poland for a bilateral meeting at the White House today. And that meeting with Poland, a key American ally in Eastern Europe, comes one day after the leaders of Russia, China, and North Korea met in Beijing for a large military parade, sparking concerns over the relationship between those three nations. White House correspondent Haley Bull is live with us now with details. And Haley, what can you tell us from the events of the past few days?
Yeah, Holly, what we saw inside the Oval Office within the last hour was President Trump and Poland's president exchange praise and pleasantries as this was their first face-to-face meeting since President Trump endorsed the now Polish president ahead of his June election. Now they are having a conversation inside the White House right now, one which was expected to include on defense spending and the Russia-Ukraine war. And as you mentioned, as President Trump is meeting with his Polish counterpart this week, we also saw the leaders of China, Russia, and North Korea together. Trump writing on Truth Social, quote, "May President Xi and the wonderful people of China have a great and lasting day of celebration. Please give my warmest regards to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un as you conspire against the United States of America." And inside the Oval Office, Trump lamented a lack of credit to the United States in remarks towards China. Now, the president also indicated that he expects to speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin soon, potentially over the next few days. And this is significant as Trump had previously set another 2-week deadline to determine, quote, which way it's going to go, in which he previously suggested, based on Russian actions, the U.S. could do nothing or take a tougher economic stance. And Trump today, when pressed on that deadline, said that Putin knows where he stands and that if he is unhappy with Putin's decision, quote, "you'll see things happen." Today, he suggested there could be what he called a phase 2 or 3, saying this, but not offering concrete details. Listen.
Would you say there was no action? That cost hundreds of billions of dollars to Russia. You call that no action? And I haven't done phase 2 yet or phase 3. But when you say there's no action, I think you ought to get yourself a new job. Because if you remember, 2 weeks ago I said, if India buys, India's got big problems, and that's what happened. So don't tell me about that.
Meanwhile, the Polish are looking to discuss regional security and Ukraine in particular. Keep in mind they share a border with Ukraine, and when it comes to defense spending, are the highest defense spender in the NATO alliance when it comes to a percentage of a country's GDP. Trump notably also reiterated that U.S. soldiers will remain in Poland when pressed by Polish media on this point. Now, the conversation is expected to also include, according to a White House official, talk about energy cooperation, immigration, and freedom of speech. Holly?
All right, Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull. Thank you, Haley. Up next on Today As It Happened.
The United States now facing a lawsuit after 18 people were killed in a mass shooting in 2023. I'm Lori Jangliha. Ahead, why survivors say the shooter could have been stopped before he fired any shots.
You're watching Today As It Happened, Scripps News rundown of the biggest events and stories of the day. So let's get to it. A group of survivors and families of victims of the deadliest mass shooting in years is suing the United States for failing to stop the shooter despite numerous warning signs. We have reestablished contact with national investigative correspondent Lori Jane Gliha, who covered the shooting in Lewiston, Maine extensively. All right, Lori Jane, so please update us on why they're suing the United States.
Right, Holly, this shooting happened at the hands of a member of the United States Army Reserve. He killed 18 people, and our previous reporting found there were multiple warning signs before the attack.
I don't recall about 30 seconds after I was shot how I got up from the floor or how I got out the door. I knew that I had to hold my arm tight so that I wouldn't bleed and continue to bleed out.
Last spring, shooting survivor Jennifer Zanka shared with Scripps News how a bone in her arm was shattered by a bullet in 2023. She was in Lewiston, Maine, hanging out with her friends at a bar and restaurant when a gunman opened fire. The shooter ultimately killed 18 people at 2 locations. A bowling alley.
And this is the wall that we all went around.
And the bar and grill where Jennifer had been socializing. The deadliest mass shooting of the past 3 years.
It just didn't have to happen, this whole tragedy, because there were so many people that knew he was going to do a mass shooting.
Now, Jennifer is among 100 survivors and victims' families joining a lawsuit against the United States government. Attorneys filing the suit say the government could have done more to stop the shooter, who was a member of the United States Army Reserve.
We will be taking steps in the coming months.
Last summer, they warned legal action would be coming.
With each investigation, we've learned that there were failures, and now comes the time for accountability.
Our investigation found dozens of law enforcement officers, including some of the shooter's own military superiors, knew about the gunman's access to firearms and his repeated threats, some for months. And a special investigation conducted by an independent commission found the military failed to take steps to reduce the shooter's threat to the public and ignored strong recommendations from his mental health providers to stay engaged with his care. A separate Army investigation also found multiple failures, including communication breakdowns within the shooter's military unit. Attorneys say the U.S. Army, Department of Defense, and an Army hospital were negligent by failing to respond to warning signs ahead of the attack.
He was mentally ill. He should never have had these guns.
More than 1,000 current and former Department of Health and Human Services employees are demanding Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. resign. Today, the group sent a letter to Congress demanding he step down, arguing Kennedy's leadership has, quote, put the health of all Americans at risk. The demand comes days after CDC Director Dr. Susan Menares was fired and 4 other senior officials resigned. And after days of speculation, President Trump says he is going forward with his plan to send federal forces into Chicago. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker had threatened legal action to stop the deployment, and Chicago's Mayor Brandon Johnson says there's no need to bring in the troops, citing a downward trend in shootings. No exact timing on when that could happen. And immigration lawyers say that the U.S. has sent at least 20 deportees to various African nations in the last 2 months. Several of them are now held in maximum security prisons despite facing no criminal charges. Scripps News national correspondent Kitty Tubman takes us through the latest on this policy. Kitty, what are you learning?
Well, Andrew, the U.S. is striking agreements with 4 African nations to take in migrants in a program that has largely operated in secret. Now, legal aid lawyers in New York are saying that the U.S. sent at least 5 men to the African nation of Eswatini, and for the first time, they're actually identifying one of them as a Jamaican national who had actually completed a criminal sentence in the U.S., but is now imprisoned in a maximum security prison in Eswatini. Now, on a growing list of African countries, Eswatini is one of them. They've agreed to receive non-citizen deportees and who have 0 ties to these countries, and that list includes Rwanda, South Sudan, Eswatini, of course, and as well as most recently Uganda. Now, several other African nations are reportedly considering similar agreements, and we spoke to a senior policy analyst at the Migration Policy Institute, Ariel Ruiz Soto, and he told Scripps News that that while third country deportations aren't new, the Trump administration has been focused on sending people to more places much faster. Here's what he said.
The key concern is not just the number of people that are being sent to third countries where they're not from, but also that they're not necessarily given the review and the due process to actually consider where those people would be in violation of their protection or asylum claims by being sent to a different country.
Now, Soto said this expedited process could also result in deportees being sent to unsafe countries, which would and could violate international law. Meanwhile, some countries have refused to take in deportees altogether. That's including Nigeria's foreign minister, who was quoting rap group Public Enemy when he said, "I can't do nothing for you, man," as he declined to accept hundreds of Venezuelan deportees from the U.S. And then there's Uganda, which is where the U.S. wants to send El Salvadoran immigrant Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and they have drawn a line, refusing to accept deportees with criminal records. Here's what Soto had to say about what this means.
That is in counter to what the Trump administration is suggesting, that they're focusing on criminals who are the most violent of them all. Most countries know that they don't want to receive criminals from other countries into their country and therefore have those stipulations. But I do think it shows a clear mismatch.
Now, that mismatch could slow down the Trump administration's plans to deport, quote, the most despicable human beings to these third countries. So far, deportees from the U.S. have mostly been men who the U.S. officials said have been convicted of violent crimes here in the U.S. Andrew?
All right, Katie Tillman for us in New York. Katie, thank you.
Coming up on Today as It Happened.
What was it like to come out and share your story today?
Very empowering and scary. We were all scared.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer, here with your daily rundown of today's top stories.
I was a 16-year-old high school student athlete who made good grades and had high aspirations for college when I was recruited and asked by a classmate of mine alongside with a 20-year-old male if I wanted to give an old rich guy a massage. But what high school girl would not want to do that? That day changed my life forever. And when I got into the massage room, Jeffrey Epstein undressed and asked me to do things to him.
This morning, survivors of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein joined members of Congress to discuss the release of the Epstein files. It comes just a day after a House committee released thousands of additional pages of documents related to the case, though much of that had already been made public. Scripps News Congressional correspondent Nate Reed is live on Capitol Hill to help break down what we saw earlier today with the testimony from those survivors. Nate, it was powerful at times. It was bipartisan. Yeah. Now, a couple hours later, has it changed any minds where you are?
It doesn't appear to have, Andrew. I mean, at this point, that discharge petition, that attempt to try and sidestep Speaker Mike Johnson from blocking this resolution to release all the Epstein files on the House floor, it has just as much support as it did before the press conference. And that's notable because there were other Republicans who haven't signed on to the effort who were listening. Representative Victoria Spartz, the Republican from Indiana, was literally standing directly in front of me for the entirety of the press conference up until the question and answer portion. She left afterward. I caught up with her. She said she still hasn't made up her mind about whether she wants to sign on to this effort. I've just spoken with several different Republican representatives who have not signed on yet, told me that they don't plan to. One, Congressman Troy Nehls, a staunch Trump ally from the state of Texas, told me that he thinks this whole thing is a distraction from other important issues that Congress is dealing with. President Trump earlier today in the Oval Office calling this a Democrat hoax. But to be clear, there are Republicans who've signed on to this effort. And the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein who spoke today made clear they don't view this as a partisan issue, as a Democrat versus Republican issue. They think that this is an issue that needs to be addressed by Congress, that information needs to get out there and needs the levels of support from some of the highest peoples in the U.S. government. I caught up with one of the victims, Maria Lacerda, who spoke out today in front of the Capitol for her first time ever publicly, who told me afterward that she believes that information needs to get out there, and she is worried about possible retaliation from the Department of Justice. Take a listen. What was it like to come out and share your story today?
Very empowering and scary. We were all scared.
Are you concerned about the people in government who might come after you as a result of this?
I think we're all scared of that. I have to say that.
What kept you from speaking at this point?
I think truly, I don't think anybody had ever asked. And also, we were all scared. We were all very scared of that. And I don't think there's any more hiding. I think all the victims need to come out at this point, and I hope they do, because it will empower and help this bill pass.
Will you help this effort to try and get the names out there of some of the people who Epstein was associated with?
It's very hard for me to say, because if you heard of my speech, I have so much trauma that I don't remember my story. So hopefully I will be able to get my file so that I can help put a list together, but I'm pretty sure there will be a list, like one of the victims said.
And what's your message to Republican members of Congress who so far have not signed on to this effort to release the files?
We said it. This is not a Democrat. This is not a Republican. This isn't everyone. It's an American thing. We need the American people to all come together and speak.
And another Epstein survivor, Lisa Phillips, as you heard me kind of allude to there, said that she would release or look into releasing her own list of some of the people that she believes Jeffrey Epstein was associated with, or possibly Jeffrey Epstein pawned off some of these victims on as part of this wide-reaching investigation, names that are possibly already known to the Department of Justice. Ms. Phillips, are you concerned, though, about recrimination, about the DOJ coming after if you work to try and put together a list of these names that you'd put out yourself with other survivors?
Well, they're just experiences that we've had over the years, right? So how could we get in trouble for writing down an experience that we had?
A lot of questions about what that list could look like, whether it could come together, whether that would see the light of day. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who did sign on to this insurgent effort, saying that she would be willing to publicize that list on the House floor, where you have some protections from recrimination, from lawsuits. Again, a lot of questions about what more we will learn, whether more information will get out there, and furthermore, whether this press conference, this historic press conference here on Capitol Hill, really changed any hearts or minds in this effort. At this point, it doesn't appear that it has. There are other attempts right now in Congress to try and quell this. A lot of questions about whether this would pass in the House, whether it could pass the Senate, and whether President Trump would veto this, given that he did call this earlier today a Democrat hoax.
All right, Nate Reed on Capitol Hill for us. Hundreds of military and civilian lawyers could soon serve as temporary immigration judges. This is the latest move from the Trump administration, using the military to support its ramped-up immigration deportation efforts. Scripps News legal affairs correspondent Abijoy Burnett is on the story. She joins me now live. So, Abijoy, why do some attorneys think it's a bad idea for government lawyers to temporarily serve as immigration judges?
Hey there, Andrew. Well, some immigration attorneys believe that this is a bad idea because they're saying just because you're a lawyer does not mean that you would be a good immigration judge. One attorney told me, for example, that the immigration legal system is just as complicated as tax law here in the United States. There's a memo that was recently sent out which shows that the administration has plans to send about 600 attorneys from the Department of Defense, both civilian and military attorneys, over to the Department of Justice to help as immigration judges. And all of this is happening as more than 100 career immigration judges have either been fired, they retired, or they were reassigned to other roles. And pretty much what this is supposed to help out with is this major backlog of immigration cases here in the United States. But one immigration attorney told me that it's very dangerous if you have a lawyer who doesn't have the experience, who's then elevated as a judge. There's a possibility that they could make really bad decisions in life and death situations. He gave me the example in one case where someone could be an asylum seeker who's an immigrant here in the United States. And if there's a bad ruling, that person could be sent back to their home country into a bad situation. Here's more from that attorney. His name is Jeff Joseph. He's the president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Here's more on what he had to say.
When you're talking about people that are being deported and have legitimate claims to being persecuted or tortured in their home countries, and you're delegating that life and death decision to someone who has no experience, you might as well send somebody with a heart attack to a finger doctor. I mean, it's not, you're not going to get the kind of due process that that person deserves and that our system demands.
Now, according to the Department of Justice's own website, there is about a 3.7 million case backlog of these immigration cases. So clearly there is a need for more immigration judges to help push through these cases. Jeff told me that this is a situation that really could take decades in some cases. I was able to reach out to the White House earlier today, and they sent us a statement regarding this memo and the efforts to clear up that backlog. And a White House official said the administration is looking at a variety of options to help resolve the significant backlog of immigration cases, including hiring additional immigration judges. This should be a priority that everyone, including those waiting for adjudication, can rally around. But the White House did not answer a follow-up question with regards to the timeline of when these potential 600 attorneys could be deployed to the Justice Department to serve as DOJ immigration judges. So there's still really a lot here that needs to be cleared up, but clearly there are efforts to help clear that backlog of more than 3.7 million cases, Andrew.
And Emma Joy, are there any concerns that the administration could violate any laws by using military attorneys as immigration judges?
Yes, so Jeff, who we just heard from, said there is absolutely a concern here. And what he explained to me as an immigration attorney, these particular cases are usually civil matters. The criminal immigration cases are usually handled in a different way. And military officials, even if you're an attorney, you're not supposed to be used to handle civilian cases. So he believes that there could be a violation of the law here. And if this is something that sounds familiar, it is very similar to some of the arguments that we heard in Los Angeles when the National Guard was deployed there for civilian law enforcement. Just this week, a federal judge ruled that the administration's use of the military for civilian law enforcement was illegal. So Jeff, with the Immigration Attorneys Association, he believes that there's a possibility that there could potentially be a lawsuit trying to prevent the Trump administration from using these attorneys and elevating them to immigration judges and using them in this way, Andrew.
All right, Evan Lloyd Burnett in our D.C. newsroom. Evan Lloyd, thank you.
Up next on Today As It Happened.
In Beijing, three of America's top adversaries, Xi, Putin, and Kim, stood together as China marked the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. The military parade wasn't just a commemoration, it was a flex of new weapons and a message to Washington and President Trump.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. All right, let's jump back into our rundown of the day's top stories.
July had the fewest open roles listed in 10 months, according to the Labor Department. More significantly, there was more than 200,000 jobs short of what economists had predicted. There were 7.1 million jobs listed in July. The healthcare, entertainment, and lodging industries saw the biggest drop in open roles. Economists say this could be a sign of a cooling labor market. And U.S. Customs and Border Protection intercepted $500,000 in contraband at Seattle's airport. That contraband was fake Labubu dolls, also called Lafufus. Authorities seized more than 11,000 of the knockoff dolls, a retail value of more than $500 million, according to officials. The shipment was from South Korea and was falsely labeled LED bulb. No arrests have been made, and the intercepted dolls will be destroyed. And Florida Surgeon General announcing today the state will end all mandatory vaccines for Florida children. That includes shots for measles, mumps, rubella, polio, chickenpox, and hepatitis B. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says he'll work with the state legislature to get rid of the mandates and give parents the power to decide whether or not to get the shot. Florida is the third most populous state in the U.S. and would be the first to drop vaccine mandates for all residents. And new health warnings about scrolling while sitting on the toilet. A study released today surveyed people about their bathroom habits, and 66% of adults admitted to using their smartphones regularly as they do their business, and nearly half of those people are more likely to have hemorrhoids compared to the others. Researchers say keep the 5-minute rule. Try to get everything done in that time frame, and if you can't, better try again later. All right, then. On to other news. China marking 80 years since the end of World War II with a massive military parade in Beijing. President Xi Jinping used the occasion to showcase new weapons and to send a message to the world. Scripps News Washington, or international correspondent Jason Bellini joins us now from Washington. And Jason, what stood out to you from today's parade?
Hi, Andrew. President Xi, he emphasized that China's rise is unstoppable, and he aimed to showcase that by putting forward for the world to see some of its most advanced weapons and how it's evolved militarily to now have a military-industrial complex capable of producing at scale weapons that the world really hasn't seen before.
Beijing turned history into hard power, an anniversary parade that doubled as a technology briefing and a warning to the West. President Xi Jinping reviewed troops as flyovers painted the sky, 26 helicopters forming a giant 80, pageantry with a purpose. The biggest reveal, China displayed land, sea, and air strategic forces together for the first time, a triad meant to signal global reach and a more secure nuclear deterrent. Also new, faster, smarter anti-ship and hypersonic weapons. They're designed to push U.S. carriers back from the Western Pacific, raising the cost of getting close to Taiwan. And unmanned systems were everywhere. Drones in the air, at sea, underwater, even robotic quadrupeds, paired with lasers and microwaves to shoot down drones cheaply. The message is about fighting with scale and economics. Implications for America, higher risks at sea, and a shift towards warfare built on swarms and countermeasures. Bottom line, this wasn't just a parade, it was China rolling out a playbook for competition with the United States.
The parade lasted 90 minutes, and it showed that China is closing gaps, and it's in a better position to compete and threaten U.S. naval assets, including aircraft carriers. I mean, so much of what we saw, Andrew, are new weapons that are designed to attack competitors, adversaries, and reach them in the sea with large aircraft carriers and also American American fighter ships.
Yeah, and Jason, tell us more about those drones and even robotic systems in the parade. What's the significance there?
What the Chinese are trying to do is display that they're now focusing on intelligent weapons, and drones in particular, drone swarms. And so we saw large drones that they're now deploying, ones that are more like the American ones that you've seen when they participate in attacks on terrorists, and also the smaller drones like those we see in Ukraine that are being used by individual soldiers to control them, the very inexpensive ones. Also, a big focus of their technology right now are counter-drone technologies, including lasers that could shoot swarms of drones out of the sky, or so they say. They have that capability. And one of the things I'm hearing from Americans and also from analysts is that what's troubling to them about this is that they see the pace at which China is producing these new types of weapons, and America may not be keeping up. Andrew?
All right, Scripps News international correspondent Jason Bellini for us. Jason, thank you.
Coming up on Today as It Happened.
Epstein survivors speaking out. I'm Alex Miller. Coming up, their stories, some being told for the first time, and what one survivor told President Trump.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened, Scripps News debrief of our top stories of the day. So let's jump right back in.
A federal appeals court will uphold Illinois' ban on carrying firearms in public transit. This reversed the lower court's decision that the state law violated the Second Amendment. The three-judge panel explained that the law is in line with centuries of practice of limiting firearms in sensitive and crowded, confined places. And another appeals court has reinstated a Biden-appointed federal trade commissioner who President Donald Trump tried to fire. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals found that Rebecca Kelly Slaughter could only be removed for inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office. The president attempted to fire her in March without citing a reason. Slaughter's case is just one of a number of similar cases that are challenging the president's efforts to fire Democrat-appointed leaders of federal agencies. Historically, Congress has tried to insulate these agencies from political pressure. Well, today, survivors of Jeffrey Epstein took the spotlight, speaking outside of the Capitol. They said they wanted their voices to be heard and called for more transparency. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller is live from New York. And Alex, some of these survivors we had not heard yet until today. What was their message?
Well, Andrew, they say they don't want this case nor their stories politicized, but what they do want is transparency and justice for all of those involved. Survivors of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein speaking out.
Disbelieving survivors creates a culture of silence. There is strength in numbers, and our courage is contagious.
Some telling their stories for the first time publicly.
He gave me an ultimatum. Either you come here and massage me when I call you, or you bring me friends of yours to massage, and I will give you $200 per girl for each time she comes. I felt and hoped to never hear from him again, but he called me every day.
A group of women who say they were sexually assaulted by Epstein appeared on Capitol Hill Wednesday alongside lawmakers. One survivor making this direct appeal to President Trump.
I cordially invite you to the Capitol to meet me in person so you can understand this is not a hoax.
But moments later, the president saying this from the Oval Office.
This is a Democrat hoax.
The survivors, who were joined by some lawmakers, said they want more transparency.
Transparency is justice. Release the files. End the secrecy. Release what needs to be released.
Release all the records related to Epstein and Maxwell investigations.
On Tuesday, a House committee released thousands of documents related to the Epstein investigation, but much of the information from those documents was already publicly known. Meanwhile, Republican Congressman Thomas Massie and Democrat Ro Khanna continue to push forward a measure that would require the Justice Department to publicly release all documents related to the Epstein investigation. And Andrew, that bill needs 218 votes in the House to go around Speaker Mike Johnson. Right now, they have the support of all Democrats and a small group of Republicans, and they need a handful of Republicans more in order to advance it.
And Alex, many of those survivors also called out Ghislaine Maxwell. What did they have to say about her?
You know, she's serving 20 years in prison for her involvement with Jeffrey Epstein and keeping these girls underneath his thumb for all of those years. Some of them want to see life in prison. They did not offer her any leniency. In fact, they were incredibly frustrated when asked about her, particularly at the fact that she's recently been transferred to a minimum security prison camp in Texas. They are not happy about that. They're also not happy that they found out about it on the news, and they are sending a message to the president, who has floated the idea of pardoning her, that he should not do so. They want her to stay behind bars.
Thank you for joining us this evening for Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. We hope you have a great Wednesday night.